Welcome to episode 134 of the Half Point Per podcast. I'm your host, Evan Riggs, and I think this is only the second time in the history of the show we've ever not gone live to start the podcast. We just gave you guys a really good 15-minute start to a podcast that will just never be heard. Again, I am joined by my co-host, Dalton Willie. Producer Johnny Pham is in the background. He can jump back on later in the show or right now if you'd like. Hello, Johnny. We had a pretty hilarious open where we talked about Dalton's headset a lot. I'll just put him up here again real quick without going through the whole thing again. Just anyone on the YouTube who's watching, just take a look at the headset, see what you notice, get back to us. That was a lot of fun.
It's made that way.
Very, very sad that I messed that one up, so apologies on this. And we do have a fun show today, though. We've got top 12 ranks at both receiver and running back. We're, of course, going to preview conference championship weekend as well. Dalton, we will, as I mentioned in the now lost version of this podcast, we will not do a full top 24. It's just top 12 at each position. We'll just maybe point out where we would take the first receiver, because I think we'll have running backs, at least for the first pick, maybe the first couple on the board, but we could just go ahead and jump right into it. My number one, as we said earlier, it's a very clear top four tier of receivers. As we discussed, you and I both have different orders, so that's fun, but the top four is still the top four, I think. My number one is Tyreek Hill. The guy averaged the most points per game at receiver this year. He was the wide receiver 2 in overall scoring behind only CeeDee Lamb. Got a little bit banged up down the stretch, and obviously the offense slowed down a little bit for the Dolphins, but like, he's Tyreek Hill. He's been historic the last couple of years. He's been there, and he's been amazing in his entire career. I have him at number one. Dalton, I know you have a different receiver at number one.
Yeah, I took Justin Jefferson. In a 10-game span, he got over 1,000 yards. It cannot be understated how talented he is. I think he's the best skill position player out there, other than Christian McCaffrey. And Kevin O'Connell and company will continue to trot him out there and use him in different ways. Irrelevant of who becomes the quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, he's going to produce for you week in and week out. But like we said earlier, when it comes to these top four, they're all pretty interchangeable. And when it comes to drafting for the 2024 season, I'm probably going to be more inclined to snag running backs early, because I would rather take one of these guys who fall to me at like 7 or 8 than take, with pick 3, take a guy who I think is just as good as my number 4 wide receiver.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have Jefferson third, and I just think you have to ding him a little bit for the quarterback uncertainty right now. Obviously, we know he's going to be awesome no matter who he's playing with. He went 12 for 192 and a touchdown in week 17, or was it week 8? Well, his last game, but week 18, I think.
Yeah.
And then 2 weeks prior to that, he went 6 for 141 and 1 touchdown. So he's going to produce. He's going to be awesome with whoever he's playing with, but obviously, the quarterback situation was very bad to end the season. They don't have a high enough draft pick where you think they're going to draft someone to come in and be a day one starter. Now, maybe they trade up. Maybe they trade up, or maybe they take a guy in the teens who turns out to be really good, but it's not like you're getting a Jaden McDaniels, a Drake May, a Caleb Williams coming in there without a significant move. And then maybe they bring back Kirk Cousins, but I don't know why. This is not based on anything other than just
vibes,
a gut feeling for me. I would just be a little surprised if that were to happen.
On the flip side of it, I have Tyreek Hill 4 because that Miami offense, they got figured out halfway through the season, and it's just going to be another offseason where McDaniels has to go out there, get innovative again, get interested in this motion. And I'm not saying who the Vikings bring in is going to be better than Tua Tagovailoa, but Tua has significant concerns that really limit his receiving options. And then with McDaniel's ability to spread it out and try to utilize unique things, I think that it dings Tyreek Hill for me. And then there's the age cliff. I don't think 30 is too old for a wide receiver, But for a guy who is really reliant on his athleticism for some of the big plays he makes, I'm always a little more concerned about that. So I'm just baking in a little more risk in Tyreek Hill than I am with these other three guys.
That's fair. My counter to that would be Tyreek Hill is just one of those guys that is such a freak that I'm going to have to see him drop off before I get too worked up. It's definitely a factor. You can consider it if you want to use it.
I have one of those guys in my running backs, so I understand.
Yeah. So my number 2 is CeeDee Lamb. And, this is a guy who has been really good up until this year, but he always kind of left us wanting more. The full breakout from really good to elite hadn't happened, and it finally happened, especially in the second half of the season. He finished as the overall wide receiver 1 and was just an absolute baller. Like the receiver room, Brandon Cooks is aging out. Michael Gallup's not very good. Jalen Tolbert doesn't really appear to be worth much of anything. So I think the ancillary pieces will look different, but the end result will be the same. CeeDee Lamb as clearly the top guy in this offense with a couple nice tight ends, maybe a decent receiver or two to back him up. You worry a little bit about Dak winning you a Super Bowl, but you don't worry about him being good enough for CeeDee Lamb to be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, with their poor receiver room, you don't really question whether or not he's going to average 14 targets again at this rate. He was second in the NFL at YAC, only behind Tyreek Hill. This year, they finally utilized him outside instead of in the slot, which he was really productive at both levels of the game. So you like that they're willing to put him in both spots to give you more fantasy value, to mix it up, and to not be so predictable with those coverages. And I mean, all those reasons are why I have him at my 3. He's a perfectly fine pick in the first round this year. He's a pretty safe pick in my opinion.
God, it's amazing how much you hate Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb. It's unreal.
Yeah. And it's amazing how much you hate my number 2 guy, Jamar Chase, who
number 4 for me.
Yeah. So terrible. But with the impending departures of T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd, I think they at least lose one of them. Shores up some targets. I think for sure Tyler Boyd is gone, which lets Tyreek Hill or Jamar Chase work in the slot a little more frequently. And that is a productive area for him. Bengals were bad enough this year that they have high enough pick to get a good tackle in this draft. I like that because Joe Burrow with more time means he finally has the opportunity to hit those deep ones. 2, Jamar Chase. My only concern here is the loss of Brian Callahan, their offensive coordinator, and how they go to replace him if they do somebody like Arthur Smith.
I think about an hour ago they promoted their quarterbacks coach.
Well, then I feel just as fine about it. There always be a little wonky stuff there, but I'm pretty confident their quarterbacks coach is going to keep things pretty consistent.
That worked well for the Eagles.
Yes. Well.
I just get it. It'll probably be fine. I'm not too worried about that aspect of it.
Joe Burrow doesn't have the same restraints that Jalen Hurts has. Like over the middle.
Burrow is better than Chase, or Burrow is better than Burrow.
That's a wild take. They're going to trot Joe Burrow out there at wide receiver this year.
Burrow is better than Hurts for sure. No arguments there. I have Chase 4, and to me, like a mini tiebreaker I use here is even though he had the historic rookie season to top Justin Jefferson's historic rookie season, he's the least proven of the 3, obviously in longevity, but also he has not topped out at quite as high of level. It is splitting hairs. The hairs are very thin that we're splitting here, but that is one factor for me. He's also missed, like, guys get hurt every year in the NFL. I'm not saying that like he's injury prone, but he has missed a couple games each of the last couple of years. So maybe there's a little bit more injury concern with him. Well, all of these guys have been banged up, but like it's been consecutive years for him where it hasn't been that for these other guys. I don't know. Like if Burrow's healthy, Chase will be awesome. I kind of think T. Higgins will be back, but as we've discussed, I don't really think T. Higgins will change how I feel about Chase, because those guys in Cincy have been pretty similar. If you look at their splits, when one is playing and one is not, or both are playing, it doesn't really matter which way you flip it there. Now, if T. Higgins goes somewhere else and it's better, maybe he ends up in the next top 12 that we do. He's not in mine currently right now.
Yeah, T. Higgins is definitely not my top 12 right now.
He was in consideration for me, but he's more like in the 15 to 17 range, which I think I'm still going to be high on him if he goes back to Cincy based on what I've looked at. But, everybody had him ranked as wide receiver 12 coming into this year, and it was a lost year for the Bengals, a lost year for him. I don't really want to change the outlook of him too much based on that.
Yeah, right now their quarterback is following the Philip Rivers career arc where he is only healthy every other season.
Seriously. Okay, number 5 is where it gets interesting here. A tier at number 4. And number 5, I have Amon-Ra St. Brown. Who do you have?
I have Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's impossible to put him right now above any of the 4, but
yeah,
I would say looking at my list, this is the last wide receiver that I cannot poke holes in and ask questions about, where I feel confident in everything. Even with the impending departure of Ben Johnson, I don't really have any holes in Amon-Ra's game. And for a guy who just averaged 1,400 yards, a lot of people are really quiet about how incredibly talented he is. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, his pairing with Jared Goff, who loves to target the middle, and the guy who works so well over the middle is like a fantasy match made in heaven. And if I were doing tiers, I would he will never surpass the other 4, but he probably belongs in the no holes in their game tier at this point.
It's kind of funny. I would have to. Were he and Jamar Chase in the same draft class?
I think so, yeah.
I think he probably had, partially because Chase has had injuries. He may actually have more yards than Chase as an NFL receiver, which is like wild to think about. I'll look that up as we keep going here. But yeah, it's like great player, great situation. It's not really a concern, but the only, I guess, kind of variable that could change is just, situations change year over year. There are even the best offenses and best quarterbacks. Obviously, the Chiefs' offense wasn't what it was this year. The Bengals have gone through phases, injuries, and also just struggles. The Bills as well, but for the most part, like Chiefs, you can bank mostly good years. Bills too. It's like I'm not sure the Lions and Jared Goff are quite to the level of we can just bank on them being an awesome offense every year.
Yeah.
But I also I think they're going to be good. And Amon-Ra St. Brown hasn't had to have had an elite offense like this every year to be around this value. He's been good more than just this year around this spot. So yeah, I think he's kind of the clear 5 for me. Who is your number 6?
Again, at this point, six down, there's a question in their game that concerns me a little bit, but their talent is undeniable. I put AJ Brown here.
Me too.
This is funny because we did not look at each other's rankings before this.
No. And we also didn't really I thought you were going to have him lower because you seemed more concerned about an AJ Brown rank than I did last week when we were talking about the Eagles.
Well, I'm just disappointed in it because he's better than what he's played to be. And I think part of that is the offensive environment he's in yet again. And that's the concern. And that's why he's here. The Eagles I think they're still looking to hire their offensive coordinator. They obviously fired both their DC and their OC this offseason. And Nick Sirianni is more of a general manager head coach. He doesn't do play calling duties on the other side of the ball. So there's a lot more fluidity in who is calling those plays and what they occur in. To start the season, despite it being a relatively ugly year for the Eagles, AJ Brown obviously had multiple 125-yard plus games. But all of that work is coming for him on the sideline. I went and looked, and in my top 12 wide receivers, AJ Brown had 72% of his targets come outside the numbers. He had an insane number, and those are not high-profile plays. Those never work out from those guys. This is also a player who we know has really good yak ability.
Yeah, that was what he did in Tennessee.
Yeah, his slant game is insane, and they just didn't run any. And if we have another season where they're not putting him over the middle, where he works just as effectively, then they're just going to be up and down weeks. It's going to be frustrating, and that's why he's the first one out of these tiers. Because I don't think he's any less talented than Amon St. Brown, or even CeeDee Lamb.
He's better than Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, just to be honest, he's better.
But simply put, he's just in a bad. Which it's weird we're saying this after last.
I don't know if I'd say bad, but he's just in an uncertain situation.
Yeah, right, suboptimal.
And even that, I don't know. It could end up being it's good next year again, but it's just uncertain right now with the way things ended and the turmoil kind of there. But like you think about all those things, the usage we're complaining about, and the way the offense unraveled in the last couple of weeks, and he's the wide receiver 5 on the season because he's just that good. And it's like I don't know how you can go any lower. Than 6.
I agree with you. Who's your 7?
Real quick, so. Chase has about 200 more yards. He does have 8 more touchdowns at the separator. So, So Chase has definitely been better, but like that's how good Amon-Ra St. Brown has been. Chase has been a historic player, and Amon-Ra St. Brown is like 95% that guy.
Yeah, he scored on a wheel route, which I thought was so weird in the divisional game. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, no, I did see that. All right, my number 7, and this has to be where we diverge. I took a little bit of I'll call a little bit of shot, a little bit of an upside shot at one spot at receiver and one spot at running back.
Okay.
And I have Chris Olave at number 7.
He is in my top 12. He is not number 7. I only have 2 spots lower. I have him at 9.
So. Okay, so it's not crazy. No. It's obviously a little bit of a projection. He just finished this season as the wide receiver 21. He missed the game. He left I think either 1 or 2 games early. He also played with a bum ankle for a little while this year. So he was probably, by and large, better when he was right than the wide receiver 21, but he still was not, where I'm ranking him right now. That's not what he was this year. But you look at it, he scored in double digits in 3 of his last 4 games. He and Carr did get on the same page a little bit better than earlier in the season, where it was like the struggles were very obvious. Derek Carr was making us very mad by yelling at our sweet Chris Olave the way he was earlier in the season. But I just think, Carr is not great. He's not even good, but he's good enough to where you can have this type of season with Derek Carr as your quarterback, I think. And I just think Olave is one of the best 8 to 10 receivers in football. We've talked about it. Such a great route runner. So consistent. Like for me, like the reason why I prefer him to Garrett Wilson, just from a real life and even a little bit fantasy perspective, is he's just more consistent on a play in, play out basis than Wilson. Wilson has crazy highs, and Olave can have those too, but Olave is just like, he is just so consistent on a play in, play out basis, I feel like. And really, you look at it, it feels like a bad season for Olave, but he had 1,100 yards and 5 touchdowns, and the 5 touchdowns is really the key. And he had 4 his rookie year. So it's like, if this dude just has a 9 touchdown season, he's going to be a top 10 receiver. Yeah. And I know that Carr struggles in the red zone. That may cap the touchdowns a little bit, but touchdowns, we talk about it, they're largely fluky. Rashid Shaheed scored 5 touchdowns on about half the targets and about 60% of the receiving yards. He just, Olave hits deep shots, but Shaheed hit more deep shots for a touchdown. It's just, that's how it goes sometimes. So like if Olave just has a good touchdown season next year, that alone can change his fortunes from last year to where I'm hoping he can be next year.
Yeah, he led the NFL in unrealized air yards, which it is what it's 2 years in a row he's done that, by the way. But he gets open so well in the deep game. The firing of Pete Carmichael, hopefully, is exciting. I did see today.
I saw Eli tweeting about they're going to bring in Arthur Smith because that's what the fans don't want them to do. And let me just say, I'll be very perturbed if they do that.
Well, equally bad, they brought in the guy who took over play calling duties for the Steelers for their offensive coordinator interview, which I don't really approve of either. But you're right. The big issue here, and this is why everybody underneath Amon-Ra St. Brown has questions for me, is his quarterbacking and the play calling on this team. They also have some offensive line woes that could make Derek Carr even worse. With that all being said, Chris Olave is so good at what he does. He is such a good route runner. He is open all the time. The only issue is his quarterback does not always throw him the ball when he
What's
is
so
open.
frustrating is you're right. He's open all the time, but as somebody who, I have in Dynasty, so I've had him every game of his career. There are more weeks than not where you get the halftime and you have to do a Twitter search of Chris Olave because you're like, is he playing? Like, did he get hurt? Like, what? Nope, he's just every Saints fan is yelling, throw it to Chris Olave on Twitter. Nope, he's not hurt. He's just being ignored.
Yeah. And Shaheed is an unrestricted free agent. I don't know if he's going to end up anywhere. But in the event he does, that opens up more deep in breaking routes, which was all Shaheed really did for Chris Olave, which I don't have any doubt in my mind that he can run those as effectively as Shaheed, maybe without the speed, but with the
I don't know, man. Olave is really fast too.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I have him at 9. We're not too far apart on him.
Okay, cool. So who's your number 7?
I have Puka Nacua.
I have an 8. So
okay, so again, we I would say we think we're pretty chalk, but I've seen a lot of wild top 12 rankings just for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Puka Nacua, he finished the season as wide receiver 8. He had a really good season. Obviously, he broke a ton of rookie records. He does everything really well. And Matthew Stafford has just been a fantasy gold mine for the wide receiver position his entire career. Obviously, Calvin Johnson broke the receiving record with Matthew Stafford. Then Kenny Golladay had back-to-back 1,400-yard seasons with Matthew Stafford. And then Golladay
was never heard from again.
Yeah. Cooper Kupp had the triple crown with Matthew Stafford, and then Nacua went on to break the rookie catches. So he broke a couple records in the season. And then he goes in the playoffs and drops like 150 yards in his first playoff game.
Yeah, he was awesome in that game.
Every year you expect guys to take a little leap forward when they're younger. If he gets better, and if Sean McVay, this is difficult because I don't want to say add a compliment because Cooper Kupp is still a good player, but this team has a lot of room for improvement. And
Higbee tore his ACL.
Yeah.
And in the last game of their season. So you would think that is kind of the opening for them to get younger and more explosive at the tight end position. Maybe that's where the compliment comes.
Yeah. And my expectation here is they're still going to be really good. Matthew Stafford did not show signs of slowing down.
They'll probably be better next year because they were really young, and this was kind of a F it, let's see what we can do type of year.
Yeah.
And they did well.
They started 2 rookie guards. Steve Avila played really well for them. This Rams team is going to be very fun again next year. The only concern and the only reason he's not like a bona fide top 5 guy is you do worry a little bit about Matthew Stafford's health. We're 1 season removed from him having that elbow injury that really hampered an entire season.
Yeah, I mean, we thought he might retire. That's how injured he was, and you will never convince me he wasn't knocked out cold in that game against Detroit for a split second there, and also perhaps a broken rib on the same play. To me, yes, the Stafford thing is a slight concern. The other one, I'm not even going to say it's a concern. It's just a reason why I don't think he has quite the upside of the guys ahead of him, which I don't know. He's a little bit Amon-Ra St. Brownie, where it's like he doesn't.
It's boring.
It's boring, but also he just doesn't have the explosion that like Olave has. But obviously, the AJ Browns, Jamar Chase, those guys. Like, if Puka does this exact same thing again next year, he'll probably be like back to back with Amon-Ra St. Brown or something. Amon-Ra just is a little bit more equity right now, so that would probably be the difference between those two.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight this because it's going to be a lot more. There's going to be a bigger disparity among running backs. Like my top 6 and then my bottom 6, there's a bigger valley between the two. With all of these guys, I would be okay with drafting them as my wide receiver 1 on my fantasy roster, which I think there's a lot more parity at the wide receiver position this year than there is, or this coming year than there is.
Well, and we'll talk about this later on, but we have a great rookie class coming in too. So I didn't consider Marvin Harrison Jr. as a top 12 receiver for this list, but I know people will consider that. And depending on landing spot, we'll see. And then we have a couple other guys who are monsters in that class too.
Yeah. But neither did I. Marvin Harrison Jr. is not in my top 12 either. I will not rank a rookie in the top 12 for wide receiver just because these guys. I think my entire top 12.
At least pre-landing spot. We gotta see.
Yeah, definitely. Like if Marvin Harrison Jr. is a Patriot,
if he goes to the Giants, like that seems kind of the most likely right now. If he goes to the Giants, then it's like,
I don't know if I want that.
I mean, I do, but not a top 12 price. Okay, so Puka was your 7?
Yeah.
Okay, and he was my 8. So go ahead and give your 8.
It's DJ Moore.
Ooh, DJ Moore was not on my list, but he was probably my first or second guy that missed the cut.
This one,
I mean, this is a Caleb Williams rank, right?
Not even. I mean, even with
really
Justin Fields and Tyson Bagent, he was wide receiver 6 on the season. So, he was just really good all year, and the problem was no one else on that Bears team did anything to help him. The second half of the season, this is from Fantasy Points, DJ Moore faced bracket coverage or 3 defenders on his side of the field on 75% of his snaps. And there were 2 things going against him. One, the offensive play calling in Chicago is absolutely terrible. Like it was the start of the season, it was elementary at best. To end the season, it got a little better, but not much. Secondly, the other playmakers on this team, when DJ Moore was targeted, Justin Fields posted a 150 QBR, which is almost perfect. When anybody else on this team was targeted, he posted a 55 QBR. Like, they need to add playmakers, and they have 2 picks to do it, or maybe 1 pick, depending on who they take. But I highly expect in this draft, with them having 2 picks in the first round and 3 picks in the second round, they're going to add another wide receiver to this room. It's going to free things up for DJ Moore. It's also very rare.
They also have money to spend too.
Yeah, they have a ton of money to spend as well. You're right. It's also very rare you see a wide receiver account for all of his team's passing yards in a game, which DJ Moore did against Washington this year.
But he had like 55 fantasy points.
Yeah. So for all those reasons, like we finally got a year where DJ Moore wasn't just like if you had a better quarterback. This year, he still had his ups and downs, which is why he's lower on this list. But Justin Fields, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, whoever ends up in Chicago, I'm just confident that DJ Moore is going to still be a dog.
Yeah, I mean, I can't hate on that at all. DJ Moore's been a guy that I've liked, that we both liked, but I've had on multiple like breakout and whatever my guys lists the last couple of years. So definitely can't hate on that. Like I said, I think he'd probably be 13 or 14.
Yeah,
if I were doing ranks. So no qualms there. My number 9 is Garrett Wilson. Where is Garrett Wilson, or is Garrett Wilson in your top 12?
He is, and he got 12.
See, so I'm low on him at 9, I think. And so you're really low on him. And I have concerns with what the quarterback is going to be. I have no concerns with him really as a player, other than maybe I wish he were a little bit more consistent, like I kind of talked about between he and Olave. But what does Aaron Rodgers look like at 40 coming off a torn Achilles? Who is the quarterback behind Aaron Rodgers? Because if Aaron Rodgers is playing and he's healthy, does he stay healthy behind what is right now? We'll see what they do in the offseason. Right now, not a very good offensive line. And, at 40, coming off a torn Achilles, how mobile is Rodgers? How able is he to take care of himself like a Mahomes or a Josh Allen or Lamar could behind a bad offensive line? Obviously, it's not going to be that level, but you know what I mean? Like even Rodgers 3 years ago could make it work probably better just from a mobility standpoint than now. So that's my concern. And who do they add behind Rodgers? Do they actually add a competent veteran quarterback like they've kind of alluded to? Like, I'm just going to believe we get anything but bad quarterback play when I see it from the Jets, because I just like, it's unprecedented for a guy to play after an Achilles injury at the age Aaron Rodgers is about to do it. So I just don't know what it's going to look like.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers will be 41 in December next year, which there will be playoff football for your fantasy leagues at that time. Which one of the reasons I have him 12 is the uncertainty around Aaron Rodgers. Secondly, the Jets are still in win now, which is really concerning considering they don't have the pieces on
They
offense.
talk about a team that really needs another wide receiver.
They do, but they also need an entire offensive line. In all honesty, this year's offensive line was ranked 30th out of 32 according to Brandon Thorne. They have an offensive coordinator in Nathaniel Hackett, who I just don't believe in. He has not been good. It is a friend club in New York right now, and if you're friends with Aaron Rodgers, you're on the in. And they signed Alan Lazard to a 3-year deal. Alan Lazard got like Equinemius St. Brown almost had as many yards as Alan Lazard this year. But Alan Lazard was this team's wide receiver too. They need somebody behind Garrett Wilson that's not just Breece Hall, and they don't have it. I know it's exciting because for back-to-back years, he's posted 140-plus targets, and they have been some of the worst targets you could get for a wide receiver. And then you just have an uncreative play caller and a quarterback who, at this point in his career, is at the end. I mean, we saw Tom Brady at
44.
And his last season was not the best.
Yeah.
But
he,
I would say it's aspirational for Aaron Rodgers to do that.
Tom Brady didn't have, well, number one, Tom Brady is probably one of one when it comes to this. And number two, Tom Brady's last serious lower body injury was like in 2008.
Yeah, an ACL tear.
Yeah, so that it's just a big variable that we just can't account for until we see it.
Yeah, and I'm just also, and I know this is really nitpicky, but I question a lot saying a guy is as talented as our top 4 when he simply hasn't done it. When Justin Jefferson with backup quarterbacks has done it, I know the situations are entirely different, but still, there's a bit of a knock there, and I think a lot of people are giving him an extra mile when I don't know if he's deserved the extra mile.
Yeah, I mean, the two of us might make up 2 of the 5 people on the internet who have Olave ranked higher than him. And, Olave has not exactly had much better quarterback play over the last couple of years. And has been at least more consistent, and he's even still obviously been inconsistent. Yeah. But again, go ahead. The highs are just so high.
I almost ranked Mike Evans over Garrett Wilson. It was really close.
Yeah, it's just Mike is a free agent, so it's hard to know what to rank him as right now. So that was my 9. He's your 12. So your number 9 is?
It was Chris Olave. I'm down.
Oh, okay. Okay. So my 10's Michael Pittman. I kind of think he's going to be back in Indy. He's a stud. Had a career year. Just an incredibly good, well-rounded receiver. We're big believers of Anthony Richardson as well on this podcast. I just think Pittman is a pretty locked and loaded, like top 10 to 15 type of guy. And he's just I like him the best out of this next group of receivers.
He actually did make my top 12. He was a consideration. No knocking on his game. I need to see more of Anthony Richardson. I'm going to be a big believer all offseason Anthony Richardson. I need to see more of what the Steichen offense looks with it. How many of those RPOs turn into P's instead of R's when Anthony Richardson is in the backfield. And my biggest thing with Michael Pittman is I think he's going to be back. I also see a ton of wide receivers mocked to the Colts in the middle of the draft. So I don't know if the indication around the league is he's not going to be there, or a lot of people are just spewing doo-doo out of their mouth when it comes to their mock drafts.
Well, it could be both. It could be both.
I think he's an incredibly talented wide receiver. The other 2 guys I have on here I just think are more talented than him. My number 10 is Davante Adams.
Okay, so he's my 11, and I bet you.
Oh, so you left him. I almost left the guy you left off.
I bet you most places don't have Davante Adams ranked this high. Like most places I look don't. I think we're going to be high on Davante Adams this year.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
For one, he's never been a wide receiver who wins with his athleticism. And even if you want to knock him for getting older, he was more than effective at his route running this year. The issues,
I don't think the issues were him at all.
Me neither. It got better when Pierce came in. I'm glad they kept Pierce as a head coach. I also really believe the Raiders end up with a different quarterback. Aiden O'Connell simply ain't it. But Devontae Adams is like a 1-to-1 when it comes to talent in the NFL. He is by far the most efficient and effective route runner. A full season with him, I think Pierce is going to be able to utilize him more effectively. And I mean, it's a lost season for Devontae Adams, and he finished as the wide receiver 16, and that's with multiple games where he got 1 to 2 targets. Yeah. Which is something that I don't think you do again.
He scored 0.9 points in the fantasy semifinals.
Yeah. So I'm definitely higher than him. I just don't know how you can't be, because he's still one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL.
I am just really sad. I went to double check his contract. I'm real sad. He signed a 5-year deal and he got there. So I don't think he's going to be on a different team unless he kind of gets the NBA player treatment where he makes things that miserable that they trade him.
Yeah. But he also apparently really likes Antonio Pierce.
Yeah. And, just like from a team and quarterback perspective, I think things went almost as bad as they could have. And like you said, I think I actually wrote down wide receiver 13 for him. Top 16 finish, whatever, splitting hairs there. Like, I understand there were a lot of down weeks. I mentioned the 0.9. He had a stretch of 4 or 5 weeks in a row where he was in the single digits. But he also had games of 20.1, 31.1, and 35.7. And it wasn't just one explosive play got him those days, or 2 explosive plays, especially that 35-point game. It was he dominated an entire game because he's still capable of doing that. It's just, can the team get him the ball? And I'm with you. I think, even though I don't know how great the situation will be, I think it will be better than it was this last season. Like, I just think this guy is still one of the best 5 receivers in football. And I don't know, like, do you have Stephon Diggs in your top 12? Is he?
Barely.
So
he's 11.
He's not in mine, but everywhere I looked, he's ahead of Devontae Adams. And it's just like,
I can't do that.
I'm not sure based on how things fit. Like, maybe we find out Diggs really, maybe he has surgery in a week and we're like, oh, okay. But, he didn't have, He didn't have over 50 yards for a long stretch of time to end the season. And Adams put up better performances down the stretch than Diggs with Josh Allen as his quarterback. Like, put Devontae Adams in Buffalo and what happens? He's probably the wide receiver 2. I find the Diggs over Adams thing being consensus. I think you can argue it, but I think it's weird that everybody thinks that right now.
The only reason Stephon Diggs is in my top 12 is respect for how good he is. Yeah. But today, Brandon Beane came out and said that Dorsey deserves consideration for the OC position, and I think that would be a huge problem for the Bills.
You mean at it, not Dorsey?
Sorry, Joe Brady. RP Dorsey. Under Joe Brady, the Bills passed 10% less than they did under Dorsey. They passed on 49.3% of their plays, which on the second half of the season ranks them top 5 in the NFL in rush rate and bottom 20 in pass rate. It is horrible for Stephon Diggs' value. And also, their solution to Josh Allen's turnovers, and I talked about this after the Chiefs game, is they turned Josh Allen into a game manager who throws it short. And we saw at the end of the game, Josh Allen unload one of Diggs that got dropped. But they are trying to scale back on his turnover-worthy plays.
Well, how many? Was that Diggs' only target past like 10 yards down the field? Like,
yes,
they only threw 50 yards down the field or at the line of scrimmage. There was like 2 or 3 passes that were over the middle for like 10 yards. Yeah. It was a little weird.
And it significantly costs his value because he wins down the field. He wins consistently down the field. But they're not willing to do that right now.
And Shakir is an ascending player. Dalton Kincaid is an ascending player. James Cook, obviously, an ascending player.
So you just worry. I'm not going to say he's going to be on my bust list, but he's probably going to be like a do not draft player for me all off season because that Buffalo situation feels really weird. We're going to get an entire offseason of cryptic Stephon Diggs tweets where he's like, the knife is in your house and it's going to stab you or something. And I'm just not looking forward to it. There's going to be him and Josh Allen just aren't on the same page, and him and that coaching staff just aren't on the same page. And he's my 11 because he's still good. But
yeah, he is still good. It's just tough to know what to do with him right now.
Yeah. So who's your 11?
Well, I'm looking at his contract, and like Devontae Adams, he is going to be on his team next year. They're just not going to trade him. It would cost them too much money. So my 11 was Devontae, so I only have one left at 12, and that is Brandon Ayuk. Like, he was the wide receiver 12 this season. That's with Debo playing 15 games, Kittle playing 16 games, and CMC playing every game this year. Now, Ayuk played a lot, but I would think what is probably more likely is one or multiple of those guys is going to probably miss time next year. Like, I just think that he's one of the best route runners in the league. Amazing offensive system. Can he be the wide receiver 4 in his current situation with minimal injuries? No, probably not. But is he about as safe as a receiver as you can get at this point? Like, I feel a lot safer with him than I do with Stephon Diggs on my team going into next season, I think.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that.
And even like Devontae Adams, I think he is safer probably than Adams.
And Ayuk is on the team one more year, right? He's not a free agent yet.
Yeah, I think that's right. Now, obviously, we've seen that is when the extension talks start coming, and we'll see what happens there. What helps the Niners is Brock Purdy is playing for like $10. Yes. What hurts the Niners is they've paid a lot of guys. So I don't know what's going to happen there. I would think Ayuk would be a priority for them to keep. I would think
issues with Ayuk's game for me. Not that Brock Purdy is what he is, which is a good player in the perfect system for the kind of player he is. But there are just limitations that puts on the game. And then the number of mouths to feed on that offense just creates spike weeks. I don't hate him being top 12, though. He was more reliable than Stephon Diggs in the season.
Yeah.
9 of Stephon Diggs' last 10 games, he was under double digits. And in all of those games, the Bills won. So you don't like that. And you don't like Ken Dorsey or Joe Brady coming back to being their OC if that happens. So, yeah, I might even switch that out come closer to the year.
Do you – so are you done with your list? Have you given us your 12?
Yeah, we're done.
All right. Let's go to running backs here. We'll get through these a little bit quicker so we have about 10 minutes to preview these games. Number 1, I think it's easy, right? It's Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, I think 1 through 3 should be easy.
Yeah, what can you say about McCaffrey?
Yeah, like he's 1-to-1. He scored more than quarterbacks this year.
It just is what it is. I have Breece Hall too.
I have Breece Hall too.
Like, he finished as the RB6 or something like that a year off of the ACL tear and a lost season for the team. He's just a freak show. Give him another year removed from injury and even just a slightly more functional offense. And this guy,
which we expect. He led running backs in targets this year. He was the only running back with 2 175-yard plus games.
Yeah.
The only running back with 4 90-plus receiving games. You can't beat that. Hopefully they draft a tackle in the first round and shore up a little bit of the offensive line for him. But you're coming back year 3 off of an ACL injury now. I really expect he'll be fully healthy. And in spite of what we said about Garrett Wilson, I do think the offense moves a little better than they did this year for sure.
Yeah. Number 3, Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, 1 through 3 are my first tier, and it ends with this guy.
I think I've seen ranks that have others in this spot, but like, I think Taylor just reminded us how good he is, how much of a workhorse he can be when he's healthy. I talked a little bit about the Colts offense earlier with Pittman. I like this team. I like this offense. I love Jonathan Taylor. Like, I think it's going to be a great spot for a great player.
Yeah, you have a Russian quarterback who's going to arguably get Jonathan Taylor some lightly stacked boxes because they're going to be spying him. Shane Steichen's a genius. I just can't hate this. Yeah, I agree.
Number 4 for me, I have Jahmyr Gibbs.
I actually have Jahmyr Gibbs at 8.
Wow.
I have his rookie draft counterpart here.
Okay. I have Bijan a couple spots lower, but for Bijan, it's a little bit of a placeholder. We'll get to that in a minute. With Gibbs, it's like, I just kind of think he is Alvin Kamara, not maybe from a player perspective. I still think Kamara at his peak was better, but just from the sense that that dude's going to get 12 touches, and he is so explosive. He is going to have massive days. I do think it wouldn't shock me to see him just like make up a little bit. I say make up ground, earn a little bit more of a work share in that backfield than Montgomery in year 2. He's obviously more established. He knows the system at this point. He had a great third down pass protection pickup in that game the other day, and that meant a lot to me because I was like, wow, like I was listening to the Athletic Football Show, and one of their questions was, how much Gibbs do we see in this game? Because the Bucs blitz like crazy, and are they going to trust him pass pro? And they did in a big spot, and he picked it up like he like bulldozed a linebacker. Yeah. So if he can do that stuff and get on the field even more, and if those 12 touches a game go to 15 touches a game, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I think Gibbs is ultra talented. The reason for my ranking is a couple of things. Every guy I have in front of him, I would put in the workhorse role. And in fantasy right now, I think it's just important to get a guy that I can rely on for.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. I just kind of think Gibbs is so explosive, like kind of like Kamara, like I said, that I think he can be efficient enough to where it won't matter as much.
Yeah. My other concern, and when you read the stat, it sounds like a wild concern. 8 of his touchdowns came from outside the 30. That's good because he's explosive, like you said. Those plays, there's also just a level of flukiness to them. And if he gets tackled on the 1 3 times, in most cases, this coaching staff is bringing in David Montgomery for it. His 1 touchdown that came within the 5 yards, David Montgomery famously said he subbed himself out so Jahmyr Gibbs could get the touchdown. All that's to say he's a really good player. It's just everybody I have above him, I consider a workhorse. And with the way when I looked at these rankings, I wanted to make sure I got the guys that I know are going to be in my lineup. And even if they get me 8 points a couple of weeks, there's always the chance that Jahmyr Gibbs is a 10-touch game and he just doesn't get that explosive look that we wanted. And he just doesn't have a good week for you. And you walk away feeling a little scorned, but he's still an incredible player. And he's at 7 for me. So it's not like I would take him in the second.
Oh, 7. Okay. You said 8 a minute ago. So he's moving on up. He's getting better.
He is 8. Sorry. He is 8.
Okay. Now he's worse again. All right. You're number 4.
It's Bijan Robinson.
Oh, right.
I don't know what's going to happen in Atlanta, but it's going to be better.
I have him at 6 because it's like, who's the coach? Who's the quarterback? It's all unknown.
Yeah.
Kind of a placeholder right now. He might jump a spot, maybe 2, depending on how things shake out from that perspective.
Yeah, he had 3 games that were essentially 0 points where he was active. And I can't ding him for those. He finishes the RB14 with suspect usage at most. He was out-touched by Tyler Algier in 8 of his 18 games this year, which doesn't make any sense. This offense also led the NFL in red zone turnovers, so I also just expect higher touchdown equity. All that's to be said. If they bring in some hack somehow, they don't hire any of the good coaches out there, I will get a bit be upset, but I anticipate them being better all around.
All right, my number 5 was Travis Etienne, and like he had an amazing stretch and then tailed off a little bit. But I stick by what I said earlier in the year, where we talked about how he just was doing the real running back stuff better than he ever had. The vision. Running up the middle instead of bouncing stuff. Like I liked what I saw from Etienne this year. I think people are going to look at his numbers and complain about the inefficiency. I think that was the offensive line, and the offensive line's fault. Can that get better? It's kind of one of those things where it's like, I think it can get a little bit better at the very least. And if it gets a lot better, that's great. Even a little bit of improvement would be really nice for Etienne, but he's a good player. He's I would say workhorse, but not as much so as the top 3 guys. But he's kind of like the workhorse light kind of.
I have
role.
him at 6, so I have him in my workhorse tier. Mm-hmm. My only questions are: what does the Jaguars offense do? Who do they bring in? How do they make this offense more reliable for Trevor Lawrence so they can more reliably put the ball up and down the field? And then whether or not they add offensive linemen in a draft where there are a lot of good offensive linemen. Mm-hmm. All that to be said, he's a very good player. I slotted him at 6. I have his draft counterpart above him, Kyren Williams, who he led the NFL in explosive rate. He missed 4 games, and he still finished as the RB3, which is wild in my opinion. And the Rams I mean, he had the most rush yards of any running back under Sean McVay. When you consider Todd Gurley was there for his monster years,
Wait, is that actually true?
That's actually true.
I have to look this up.
And all of those things, maybe it's most touchdowns. It's one or the other. But with all of that being said, like we talked about Puka Nacua, this offense is something I want to invest in. I'm very excited about it. And I'm going to take Kyren Williams here. I think he's solidified himself. They're going to add somebody this offseason. There's going to be chatter around it, but that's just because they need someone behind him because Ronnie Rivers ain't it.
Okay, so I think you're wrong on both the things you said. I don't know what is there a third possibility for what this stat might be?
I saw a tweet about it, so I'll tell you when I find the tweet. Give me a sec. You can go with you. Who's your 6?
Well, I'll give my Kyren. So I have Kyren at 8. And really, like the knocks on him, why I have him there as opposed to where you have him, it's just like I agree, and I said this last week. I think the Rams will add somebody. We'll see who that is. I do think that'll kind of lower his perceived value a little bit. I'm kind of already baking that in. Now, if they add nobody or somebody bad, maybe I bring him up a spot or two. But I don't know. He's in the McVay offense, and he's a good player. So I think he's good. Like, he's a very clear RB1. I just think for whatever, sometimes the fantasy numbers are better than the player, and I do kind of think that's what happened a little bit this year. So I just think we're going to have a little bit of just the teeniest step back next season. And so, like, I think he's going to be really good, but I have him lower than Etienne. And then my 7 is Saquon Barkley, whether that's New York or elsewhere. I still am just such a believer. Like, Saquon is Saquon. And like,
Saquon's my 7 as well.
Yeah, so like he's the RB16 this year, despite missing 3 games and playing on a team that legitimately threw for like 14 yards in one game. He's just awesome, and it would be great if he went somewhere that was better. Even if he's back in New York, the situation may not be ideal, but injuries really derailed what could have at least been an okay season for that offense. And it turned out to be terrible. Like, I just think you invest in Saquon and you feel good about it.
Yeah, and wherever he ends up, I'm happy with. I can't find the stat, but I'll tweet it out to our followers when I do find it. He led in some category and beat Gurley out by like 0.2 or something.
Maybe it was like yards per carry or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Per touch or something. But with that all being said, Saquon is at my 7. He's my last of the solidified workhorses right now. There's another guy later on my list who I think would be a workhorse, but we'll talk about him when we get to him. Saquon's still Saquon. He was still just as good. The thing was, this offense was terrible. Daniel Jones was back to Daniel Jones. There was no one on this receiving core that did anything to help them out. Despite that, he still had 100 yards in multiple games. He still did more for this offense than anybody else. And if he ends up in like Baltimore,
yeah, that'd be crazy.
Yeah, but wherever he ends up, it's Saquon. I'm going to have him ranked highly. He's just too good not to still.
Can I give you one that would be great?
Where?
Tampa Bay.
Tampa Bay would be great.
I don't have Rachaad White in my top 12, by the way, which is a scorching hot take on the internet these days.
Yeah, neither of us do. We could address that.
I'm going down with the ship on that one. All right, number 9, I have Josh Jacobs. It's kind of the same in the same vein as Saquon Barkley, where what happened this year wasn't his fault. He missed 3 games. He's still the RB23. You hope the situation will be slightly better this year, like we talked about with Devontae Adams in Vegas. Like, we just saw him get blown up in the backfield so much. So much. And, better line, better quarterback, whatever, the offense that doesn't hate their coach for half the season. All of those things should help a guy who I still think is a very good player, and also he could be somewhere else too. He's not locked to be back in Vegas.
Yeah, I have him at 10. Heard an exciting take on a podcast. Like, imagine Josh Jacobs in Houston.
Yeah, so Houston's another team where it's like put a good running back there, and they're going to be ranked in the top 10.
They have a lot of money. They need a better running back there. He fits what they would use for. He's a good zone runner. They have a zone run scheme. All of those things got me really excited. If he's back in Oakland, I'm a little less excited. But again, Vegas. They used to be Oakland. He's still very talented. this entire team was just a lost cause all season. There's no takeaways you can have with this season and extrapolate it onto what they're going to do next year, unless they run Aiden O'Connell out there again, which I don't expect them to do.
Even if they do, it was better down the stretch, and Jacobs wasn't healthy for some of the part that was better, so that also hurt him too.
But my number 9.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, don't want to leave your number 9 in the dust here.
It's Isaiah Pacheco.
I have him at 10. So
okay,
right
so
there.
We just flip flopped. Without Jerick McKinnon, it's become very obvious that he is the workhorse in the Bills game. CEH saw 4 touches. He saw 17.
Yeah, and they're gonna CEH is gonna be gone. They're gonna add another running back, whether it's draft, free agency, whatever, and it's not gonna be anybody. Like it just won't be anybody that's gonna take over that job. It just won't.
You got. I just don't have a lot to say. He was 3rd in the NFL in 7th in the NFL in explosive rush rate. The Chiefs' offensive line is one of the best units. It's going to get better this draft because they're probably going to take a tackle. If not, the unit's going to have another year together. It's going to be the same guys out there. Both of those matter. This offense is going to see less stacked boxes with a better receiving room, which I also anticipate coming. And I mean, Pacheco just gets it done. He's doing it right now in the playoffs, and I expect him to come around and do it in the next year.
Yeah, and here, the O-line is good. You're right, but also the O-line was probably below expectation this entire year, and they definitely had some peaks, one of those being the other day, but they've been hit or miss. So if you would have told someone before the season the Chiefs' offensive line would play worse than you think, especially in the run game, like the run blocking is always hit or miss with the O-line, it seems like.
Yeah.
The O-line would play below expectation. The Chiefs would have the worst offense of the Mahomes era. The receivers would lead the NFL in drops and yards lost and drops, and they have the worst red zone offense of the Mahomes era. You'd think, well, Pacheco had to have been a bust, right? Like, no, he was actually the RB13.
So, and he missed 2 games.
He didn't get the benefit of this great offense carried him to the RB13. Like, no, the offense can be better. Pacheco is, I would say, a good NFL running back, and a good NFL running back who, in an offense that was very up or down, was the RB13. He can be better than that this year. He can outdo the RB10. It's just like, it's hard to rank him ahead of someone like Josh Jacobs, who I just think is better. So, but like he could be the RB5 at the end of next year, and I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Are we down to 11 now?
Yeah, that was my 10.
11, I don't see in a lot of top 12 rankings for me. And it's Tajay Spears.
Really? So I don't have him, but I wanted to.
I could not get away from it. I didn't have him in it. Spoiler alert, James Cook didn't make my top 12. Tajay Spears did.
James Cook is 11th for me, but I'm really jealous of you having Tajay Spears 11th and James Cook not on there. That's a much more fun and clickbaity take to have. So I appreciate it.
It is clickbait. But also I'm just a believer in Tajay Spears. Yeah. He had 70 targets as a rookie, which is wild for a running back.
And he wasn't a full-time player either.
Yeah, he was playing behind Derrick Henry. He's the first player to do it, to actually get playing time behind Derrick Henry consistently.
Yeah.
The Titans are in full rebuild mode. They're probably going to draft a tackle. Whatever they do, Tajay Spears is so incredibly talented. He's just too good for me not to rank him here, and he's going to be their workhorse this coming season. I mean, that's all I have to say about it. I can't not put him in my top 12 because I think he is so talented.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about him a lot. I agree with that. I agree with everything you said. I can't hate on the pick at all. Very jealous of it. My 11 is James Cook. Like I said, he became the centerpiece of that offense. If they run it back kind of with the same crew, I expect that again next season. I think he's a good player. I think he's a young ascending player, and we've kind of always wanted a Buffalo running back to be the guy and have that job. I think he's good enough to where I expect him to be the guy and have that job. He can catch passes. He's even gotten to the point where he's not getting vultured by other running backs as much. His issue is Josh Allen runs for a lot of touchdowns. Yeah. So that'll be a reality for him.
Yeah, for him, it just comes back to whether or not they bring Joe Brady back as OC, because his come on really came when they ran the ball more. Mm-hmm. And no offense to James Cook truthers out there, but this offense is better when they let Josh Allen do things, not when they let James Cook do things.
Yeah, for sure.
And all that's to be said, he's still a good player. He'll be in my top 16, I'm sure. But but I didn't think he was worth my consideration.
Okay, so I'm down to my last guy. Do you have 2 left or just 1?
Let me make sure we didn't skip anybody else I had. No, I'm down to my last one.
All right, so my number 12 is Ramondre Stevenson. And this is kind of this is me taking a shot and buying into the bounce back. I think the Patriots are in a great spot to get a quarterback. And you know, whether they do it receiver, that they should add receivers, whether it's draft or free agency. Like, I don't think this offense is going to be completely remade and be great this year by any means, but it was very, 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 very bad this year, both personnel and coaching, to be frank. Like, and I think both those things can improve a decent bit next season. He was the RB33, but he missed the last month of the season. It was just like he was one of the more frustrating guys out of those top 3 or 4 rounds.
You know who led them in receiving yards?
Was it Zeke?
No.
I was gonna say was it Ramondre? He caught a lot of passes.
It was Kendrick Bourne, who didn't play half the season.
I was gonna say, you got hurt.
That's how bad it was.
Well, I guess 2 running backs, so that's also how bad it was. Like, he is one of those guys. You mentioned the workhorse tier. He is one of those guys who he has every ability to be in that tier if he's given that role. He has that upside. If this offense is functional and he doesn't have another running back who they are giving some of that stuff to, like, I still think he's the same really good player as he was this time last year, you know?
Yeah, I don't hate it. I think that offense, no matter what, takes a step forward with who the coaching staff is, because the coaching tree that Bill Belichick kept bringing in wasn't getting it done without Tom Brady. With or without Mac Jones, the offense improves, probably without. They also are more than likely going to bring in better wide receiver talent, because Demario Douglas leading them in targets and Kendrick Bourne leading them in yards is not something an NFL offense should be doing. Yeah. I buy into all of that. And I also think Ramondre is really good. Going back to college, he led his year in college in broken tackle rate. Those are always good leading indicators for guys. I don't hate any of that.
Your number 12?
I couldn't not put him here because I respect him so much. I put Nick Chubb down. And
yeah, I thought about it. It's just such an unknown right now. It has to be a placeholder, you know.
I know first he tore his ACL early in the season, which is good because he can come back. It seems like the ACL surgeries are getting better. I know he's also older. And I know
Dalton watched that injury and was like, "Oh, this is great. Thank God this happened in week 3."
I also know it's the same knee he tore his ACL in, which is also not good.
Yeah, in college, to be clear.
This guy is a workout warrior, and I don't like using these things to evaluate players, but he puts up like 565 on squat, and I just don't think that he's not going to be the guy that's rehabbing hard and going to come back. And from week 4 on, Kareem Hunt and Jerome Ford posted alternating top 20 RB weeks. I don't think that Nick Chubb can come back and not do that. And if he starts week 1 and he's 80% Nick Chubb, I'm perfectly fine with that. And he's just too good, where I would rather take Nick Chubb here than a lot of other running back. Like, very obviously, we already talked about it a little bit. Rachaad White's in everybody's top 12.
Devon Achane is in everyone's top 12 too, and he's not in ours.
Yeah. Nick Chubb is so much better of a player than those guys. Not in a bad way, even. He is just one of the best running backs in the NFL.
He's the best when he's healthy. The only thing, like, for me, it's just like, you know, what's the health status? Like, that's just going to be the whole thing. I'm going to do the exercise where I start him at like my RB25, and I hopefully work him up as we get positive reports.
Yes. But I'm going to leave him at RB12. I'm just going to buy into it now, because even if he doesn't come back 100%, even if he doesn't play the first 4 weeks of the season, if he's on your roster and you're preparing for it, you're going to have a guy who, as long as he's healthy, is going to be a league winner at the end of the season. And you're going to get a guy that you shouldn't be at a substantial discount all off season.
It's definitely a shoot for the moon type of pick for sure. So
yeah,
can't hate on it too much. All right. With that said, let's move on to quick conference championship predictions. We'll bring Johnny back in the fold for this one. We obviously have Chiefs at Baltimore and Lions at San Francisco 49ers. Through the first couple of weeks, straight up, we are all 7-3. We're all doing pretty well straight up. I think we all went 4-0 straight up. We all had the same picks. They all won last week. against the spread, Johnny and I also 7-3. Dalton is going to need us both to get everything incorrect and him correct, Johnny. He is currently at 4-6 right now, so tough sledding in that regard. But we'll start with the Chiefs at the Ravens. This is Baltimore by 3.5. Dalton, I'll let you lead the way on this one.
Wow. Love Kansas City. It's going to be the toughest game they've played. Baltimore's defense is as good as Kansas City's defense. They have been 1-2 all year in every reliable category. Not having Joe Thuney really hurts.
And we don't know for
Kansas City plus 3.5.
As I said, we don't know for sure Thuney's not playing, but it seems trending that way.
Yeah, but I'm taking Kansas City to play. I'm taking them to win outright. They're going to cover. They're going to win. Lamar Jackson has never seen the lights this bright in his life. Patrick Mahomes has seen the lights this bright 6 years in a row. So with all that, Kansas City.
With that being said, this will ruin your Super Bowl matchup that you chose the Ravens in. Just want to let you know that.
I'll take the L there.
Okay.
Your Super Bowl matchup fell out 2 weeks ago when the Browns lost.
Yeah, and I still changed it after the wildcard weekend, and it's fine.
You can't really hate on Johnny's Browns pick too much because you were barking in our group chat when they were playing the Texans. So I think you were there too. I think you were almost right there with it too.
So. It would have been a fun storyline.
But yeah, I'm taking the same line as Dalton, Chiefs and Chiefs plus 2.5.
Man, I
have a mega feature on the Chiefs at plus 700.
I'm gonna stick with my pick and go Ravens, but I'll go Chiefs cover, Ravens win, and I really agonized over this, and I thought I kind of pretty easily picked the Ravens before because it's like I felt like the AFC Championship, if the Chiefs just get there, I'm happy with it, and I still am happy with it based on how this season has gone, how freaking frustrating it's been, and the reason why I can't quite get myself there with the Chiefs is. Yes, they've played much cleaner football. The O-line hasn't had penalties. The receivers, plus Kelsey, there's been a couple drops, but not nearly as many.
And the Mecole.
Yes, and obviously McCole Hart. Like there have still been mistakes, but it's been a lot cleaner football than they've played all season. And it's like, do I trust them to do it for a third straight game? I just feel a little sick about that. Thuney, if he doesn't play, that really hurts. The Ravens have a good interior pass rush. Derek Nottie, if he doesn't play, which I don't know, he didn't play last week. I think that's a bigger deal than like the average person realizes.
Against the run game.
Against the run game. That mattered last week. It'll matter again. Willie Gay, it seems like he's going to play. Mike Edwards, I don't know. But Shamar Connor stepped in and played great outside of not falling on a fumble. That's the other thing, too. It's like, that game probably wasn't as close as it seemed by the end of it against the Bills. Last week, the Chiefs just kind of did the Chiefs thing. And if they do that again this week, I just don't know if they can overcome that. Marlon Humphrey, Mark Andrews, both back for the Ravens this week. That'll help. One thing that'll be interesting is, last week the Texans blitzed a ton in the first half, and it worked. And then the second half, it didn't. I'll be curious if the Chiefs kind of start off with that same strategy, and if the Chiefs, Spags very famously, like, is the ultimate disguiser of blitzes, bringing this exotic crap all in the playoffs. So I'll just be curious to see what that matchup looks like. I think the Ravens are going to have success running the ball, and I think Lamar is good enough to make them pay throwing the ball against blitzes. He's been good against blitzes this year, but also the Chiefs are going to have less fear of him than they did Josh Allen.
Throwing the ball. I think this game comes down to whatever defense breaks first. And it's against two all-star quarterbacks. One of them's going to break, but whichever one breaks first is going to be the one that is probably going to cost the game.
So again, I'm taking the Ravens, but I am just gonna, because we're Chiefs guys, we're gonna throw out pro Mahomes stats whenever we have the chance. I'm just gonna read you guys the results of Mahomes' 6 games against number 1 defenses, which is the Ravens. Now,
I saw this.
I will say the Bucs were technically the number 1 defense, but I don't think they were the number 1 defense until after they played the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. These are number 1 defenses like coming into the game. And also the Chiefs offensive line died that game. That wasn't Mahomes' fault. The first one was against Baltimore, in 2018, that was the no-look pass game. They almost have 450 yards of offense. They win 27-24 in overtime. The following was week 14. The next year, they go to the Patriots, and the Chiefs have 350 yards of offense, and they beat the Patriots in Foxborough with Brady. The next time was, again, in week 14 against the Dolphins at Miami. If you remember, that was the 450 yards of total offense, 4 turnovers, sloppy game, but 33-27 win. The fourth time, actually the fourth and fifth times, were the Broncos in the same year. They beat them 22-9 one time, and then the 28-4 game on the road. I think that may have been the Mahomes left hand pass game. The most recent time was in San Francisco last year, which was arguably the most complete game we've played with Mahomes at quarterback. 529 total yards of offense, 44-23 shellacking of the San Francisco 49ers last season. And then this weekend will be the 7th. So, like, he's been really good against the best defenses. He's been really good against everybody, but, like, the best defenses, it really hasn't mattered. So I don't think this is like this defense, man. I just don't think they can move the ball. I just think it really comes down to, can the Chiefs avoid the Chiefs' mistakes enough to win this game? And I'm just nervous about that.
Yeah. I mean, this is a win for the season already, and a win for Mahomes' career, considering the worst he's ever finished would be in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah.
And, you know, those losses, you have D4 jumping off sides, obviously. And then you have the game where our offense stopped playing football in the second half against the Bengals.
Someone threw out the theory recently that Mahomes got a concussion in the first half of that game. And that's like my new headcanon now.
Well, if we just kick a field goal instead of running a weird route to Tyreek Hill at the end of the first, we still win the game. All that to be said, I just think Mahomes is going to walk in there and do Mahomes things. Mm-hmm. This game does not come down to Mahomes. It comes down to whether or not our wide receivers can just step up enough to, 1, not turn the ball over, 2, catch a few of his on-target throws that are just difficult catches.
The Dolphins game, they could get away with it just being Rice, Pacheco, Kelsey. Mm-hmm. The Bills, it was, they had to have another guy step up, and Marquez Valdez-Scantling did that with 2 huge catches. That is going to have to happen again this week. And we'll see if they're capable of that. Those stats, or that Twitter thread, by the way, courtesy of Taylor Witt. Want to make sure and give credit there. All right, Lions at 49ers. This is San Francisco by 7. And I'll start this off and just say I have San Fran winning, but I think this line is too big. I think this game has major shootout potential, so that's why I'm taking the Lions to cover here. Talked about this a lot with them playing the Packers last week. Like, the 49ers defense, if you can block them, you can beat them. And the Lions have a good offensive line. And obviously, like, we know how important it is for Jared Goff to block him up too. So this is like a really high this could be a blowout, or this could be a very, very, very tight game. And I'm just of the belief that the Lions are playing very well. Obviously, the Niners are playing okay, but the Niners are the Niners. I think this will be a close game, but I think the 49ers escape with this one, or the 49ers escape with this one. The Lions cover. The Lions secondary ranks 32nd in explosive pass defense this season, so I just think the Niners are going to be able to throw the ball around the yard enough, even without Debo potentially, to be able to come away with the win here.
Yeah, I have the same picks as you. I have the Niners not covering. I have the Lions covering +7 because that's just too many points. And I have the Niners winning, although I don't feel good about it.
If this is no disrespect to the Lions, but if there were a better second team in the NFC, like, I think San Fran has been kind of ripe for an upset. Obviously, going back to the end of the regular season, and then in the first round, the Packers should have won that game. In all honesty.
Exactly.
And
rain, regardless of the rain, the formula for beating this team is getting pressure on Brock Purdy quickly. And the Lions definitely have the pass rush to do it. This offensive line outside of Trent Williams is not very good. The problem is their secondary is so bad If Debo doesn't play, that does hurt the Niners pretty significantly, in my opinion. But then you have Frank Ragnow, who's probably going to play, but he's not going to play at 100%. And I think shootout potential is I'm feeling that one, where one game is going to come down to whose defense doesn't give it up first. This game is going to come down to which offense executes the game plan more cleanly. The Niners will need a better version of Brock Purdy to show up than he did last week.
For sure. And it'll be strength versus strength, run defense versus run offense, Niners run offense versus Lions run defense. Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting, obviously, to see who can win that battle.
Yeah, I agree. But I would not be surprised if the Lions walked out of it. And it would be a crazy script writing thing if the Chiefs Lions who played week one play in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Johnny?
I agree. Niners to win, Lions to cover, but I agree with Dalton. I would not be surprised at all if the Lions came out of it.
Yeah, I just the thing about the NFL is it also this is talking out both sides of our mouth here, but it's so week to week sometimes where if San Fran shows up and plays amazing and wins 34-17, we'll all come back here feeling like, how did we not see this coming? They're so much better. So obviously we don't know what's going to happen, but I do just think San Fran has looked vulnerable enough that I have enough concerns. I think the Lions can keep up and keep it interesting. And I think we should have two great games this weekend. And on that note, that is going to do it for episode 134 of the Half Point Per Podcast. Give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Half Point Per Pod. I will at some point be putting out graphics of our top 12 ranks, so those will be available to see as well down the road. Subscribe to the YouTube. The link to all those things will be in the show notes. As always, you can see Dalton's wild and crazy headset if you do come here. The show is available anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, etc. Leave us a 5-star review. Thank you so much for listening, and some of us will talk to you again next